having terrible stomach pains that literally would stop me just dead in my tracks and double me over with pain. And I had been to the doctor many times between September 2005 and February 2006, and every time they were very dismissive of me. Sent me home, told me, take a laxative or something, you'll be okay. On Valentine's Day of 2006, I was working at Walmart, and I was the department manager of the candy section, so obviously I was busy. And I had gone in very early one morning to make sure that my Valentine's area was straight and zoned and ready for those last-minute shoppers. And I was supposed to work for a few hours, go home, sleep, come back overnight, get rid of the leftovers and put out my Easter stuff. And I made about 2 hours before the pain started. And I staggered out of the store, made it home, crawled up my stairs, and hit a sectional. And that's where I stayed for the rest of that day. I was unable to even hold down just water. I was throwing up everything. And finally, late that evening, my husband at the time and my parents ganged up on me and forced me to go to the emergency room. I was there for a few hours before they realized I needed a transfusion. And finally they decided to admit me. And nobody knew what was wrong. They thought, well, maybe it's an ovarian cyst, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I was in the hospital a few days before they realized that I had colon cancer. It did take them several days to diagnose me, but I was diagnosed finally as stage 3C colon cancer patient at the age of 29. I had nearly a complete bowel obstruction, and as soon as they found it, I was scheduled for surgery the next morning. They removed about a foot of my colon, gave me a port to get me ready for chemo, and gave me a colostomy. All of this went really fast. I met lots of doctors. I had staging. They told me I was 3C. Out of the 12 lymph nodes they took, 8 of mine were positive, and I was told there was a very good chance that my cancer would come back in the future. The good thing about being 3C is that no other organs are involved at that time, but it was as bad as it could get. After weighing all my options, I finally decided I would be treated at Vanderbilt. I kept a surgeon here in town as my point of contact, and eventually I did radiation here in town, but that was, down the road. They sent me home after 9 days in the hospital, and as soon as I could recover and kind of get adjusted to having colostomy, they started chemo. For me, that first round of chemo was Folfox. That's a regimen that let me keep my hair, but unfortunately I lost all the feeling in my fingers and feet. Everything tasted like metal. All my favorite foods became my enemy. It was hard to eat. I remember after my first chemo, we stopped at Cracker Barrel for dinner. And I remember thinking, I'm so lucky that I can eat dinner because I didn't take chemo today. But it was a long time after that before I could eat Cracker Barrel again or even really see the sign without being sick. And I'm talking years. Like, this is a recent occurrence I could eat there. I felt like I lived in a fog. I couldn't do anything that required small motor skills. I couldn't button my shirt. I had a hard time writing because I had no feeling in my fingers. So it was difficult, and I had 3 young children at the time. So all of that was going on, and at the same time, I'm still trying to get used to having colostomy, which was like having something foreign on my body. So it was really difficult. Finally, I finished chemo. I started radiation, and that part for me wasn't that bad, with the exception of the early menopause. Still just turned 30 years old. Never been so happy to see a 30th birthday. You've never seen somebody so excited to turn 30 as I was. But, after we got through all that, I came through pretty well. That was my first round. Fast forward 4.5 years, I'm in my first year of teaching, and everything's become routine. I know that every 3 or 6 months I'm going to go and have a scan, I'm going to have blood work, they're going to say everything's good, I'm going to come home. I'm nearly to that 5-year mark that everybody shoots for, and my tumor markers come up. So they did some investigating, and they figured out that I was back in the lymph nodes of my abdomen, and this time I had Folfrey. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that regimen, but that chemo was not nearly as kind. My blood pressure took a dramatic hike. The nausea was much worse. My hair was falling out in clumps. I couldn't remember anything. They had to give me shots to keep my white blood count in check, and those shots, they made every bone in my body hurt with an excruciating pain that I can't even begin to describe to you. Couldn't think straight. Couldn't smell food without being sick. I would tell my daughters they could go places and wake up the next day and have no idea where they were. Where's Brianna? She's not in her room. You told her she could go spend a night with Haley or whatever. So it was really impairing me in my ability to live an everyday life. And I tried to work through this, and it impaired me at school too. But I had friends who were very supportive. The steroids that they gave me to help combat the nausea gave me about a 100-pound weight gain, and I couldn't eat food. So it's bad enough when you gain that much weight and you get to eat everything you want. I wasn't eating, and I was getting fat. So I was miserable. But I got through it again, and I felt very lucky. Fast forward another year, and here we go again. Time to do it again. I did the same chemo. This time, they basically had to sedate me for me to take chemo without throwing up. I get the Phenergan by IV when they started, Phenergan by IV when they ended. I get wheeled out in the wheelchair, drooling the whole way and hearing things on the way home. But I got through it, and in July of this year, I finally heard the words, no evidence of disease. I take those words 3 months at a time. I still go for checkups in Tulsa. I'm at the Cancer Treatment Center now. I still go every 3 months, but I'm lucky to be going. I didn't suffer through any of this alone. I have a very supportive family, I have fabulous friends, and then I have the resources from the American Cancer Society. Being a 29-year-old colon cancer patient, especially a white female with a good body mass index, otherwise perfectly fit, is a very lonely thing to be because nobody knows what you're going through. And then the people that do know what you're going through are not people that you can relate to because they're all older. So I reached out immediately. I got online and I found the Cancer Survivors Network, which was an online community where I could go and I could ask the questions that occurred to me in the middle of the night, and I could get answers. I could say, you know, is my stomach supposed to be bleeding? Are these shots supposed to make me hurt this bad? Should I go to the emergency room? Am I dying? And somebody would answer me. And that was a very reassuring thing. When I lost my hair, and really, y'all, that's the toughest thing. I felt like I lost my whole identity. The American Cancer Society was there to fit me with a wig that looked good, and to help me pick out hats that flattered my face, and to tell me that it would be okay. I was a participant in their Look Good, Feel Better program. It made me realize that even though I was sick, I didn't have to look sick, and I could feel good about myself still. The Hope Lodge in Nashville, I've stayed there more times than I can count. Anytime I had to go to Vanderbilt to stay overnight for chemo or for any treatment, colonoscopies, I can't tell you the number of tests I've had, other kinds of tests. If I had to stay overnight, I would stay at the Hope Lodge, and that was always free. Free to me, and they put you up there and take good care of you, give you a shuttle ride back and forth to the hospital. And my caregiver could stay too. The biggest thing, though, that I think the American Cancer Society has given to me is hope. They contribute money, like the money that you raise at Relay for Life, to researching for a cure as well as to advocating for early detection. I had issues with my stomach for years, but because I was not 50 years old and I didn't fit the profile, I was not screened. This part that makes me upset. An earlier diagnosis may have made my disease curable years ago, and may have saved my children from growing up in a house with a sick mother. And I have hope that the American Cancer Society will keep others from ever having to be in my shoes. Also, I have hope for a cure. Just in the past 2 months, they have, y'all don't cry, that's not loud. Just in the past 2 months, they have released 2 new drugs that are good for colon cancer patients who have tried all the other chemos and who have had diseases still progress, and that's me. So in July, they told me that if my cancer came back, I didn't have any more options other than surgical options. The chemos I have done, and they didn't work. So just recently, they released 2 more drugs, so now I have hope, and I believe that the American Cancer Society gave me that hope. And so I also believe that if I hold on long enough, they're going to come up with a way to cure this. And they're experimenting with targeting tumors with your DNA and all this stuff, and it's very hopeful. They're not doing it for colon cancer yet. They're doing it at Vanderbilt locally, and it excites me a lot. So I am honored to be part of that by being part of something like Relay. And I know that every time I relay, I help give somebody else another birthday. Somebody else can be excited about turning 30 or 40 for me pretty soon. And so instead of crying, this is my 40th birthday, I'll be partying because I'm still here. And I thank you two for being part of this and for helping to contribute and helping people like me who need a community of support in order to get through some of the hardships that we face. That's my story. I'm Charlotte Loines.